Man, thank y'all for tuning in, man. Welcome to another edition of Live on Sundays. It's your boy, King Crowder, Terrell the Great, Crowder Gang, whatever you want to name it, man. Number one on your Sundays, y'all. This is a period where you reflect, get your mind back in order, think about how your week went, you process everything. And on Sundays, I try to give y'all a topic or something I find very important throughout the week, throughout this thing called life, man. Again, make sure you smash that like button, comment, subscribe, leave anything you want to make sure you notify me and let me know that you are here with me this evening. Number two, I also want you to make sure you call your peoples. You check up on everybody. You make sure that you have living a purpose-driven life. And this is the day where you kind of get your mental back in order. Remember, Sunday is the period of reset. It's actually the first day of the week. Historically looking, y'all know I'm the history guru. And Sunday is actually the first day of your week. So it's the first day you start all your new habits, your new disciplines, your new focus regimes. Everything should be taking place on Sunday. Let's start it off again, man. This week, mostly did a lot of repairs, did a lot of editing, making sure that the thing for the work week, you always try to stay productive. So I stayed a lot of my work week, made sure I stayed active with that. Did a lot more editing. Phase 2, got 5 people to read the book, things my parents wish they would have taught me. That is actually in our most likely final stage of reviewing. I want to drop some promos for it. I've never done that before because I kind of want to get a run for it, like I said. So that's where I'm at in that process. Thing 2 I worked on this week. If you did not know, we're going into the 4th quarter of the year. If you do not know, the years are marked up by 3 months at a time, right? And you got a quarter for each. So we're entering quarter 4. That's when you get your sales, your last bit of promotion events, everything that you may see to wrap up 2023. You will see a lot coming on along with the holidays. We're going into Q4. So if you have not made your personal plan or what you need to be working on, make sure you do that for yourself. Make sure you check and see, have I done everything in 2023 I need to do? And if not, let me make some adjustments. Man, today's topic is going to be a heavy one, but I believe it's greatly needed. Today's topic, man, came to me. I'm a first generation college student, right, y'all? My family's blue collar. Shout out to the Crowder Gang. Blue collar family, small town, grew up in the community, learned a lot about myself and growing up. But one thing that I really knew, especially when I decided to go to college, I went to a HBCU, a historical Black college university, and it was a place where you thought you were going to learn more about myself. The irony, when I went there, I learned more from my family about myself and my history than I ever did at HBCU. People look at me and pause when I say that. But today, I definitely think it needs to be talked about. Number one, HBCUs don't teach Black history. Number 2, why don't we learn more about Black American history? Number 3, I want to give you ways that you can educate yourself on it because there's so many stories that are not told, not emphasized. Rule number 1, shout out to the great Malcolm X. Our people perish because of lack of knowledge and disorganization. I'm not talking about anything else, but you got to start with yourself and what you got to learn. Everything else in your life will not be understood until you have knowledge of yourself, family, ancestrally, historically, and understanding. So, like I said, let's go ahead and drop into it, man. One thing that I found fascinating as I was growing up, y'all, is that how we are never taught anything about Black histories at HBCU. So I want to give y'all an example, y'all. There are over, as I do my research and prep, there are over 107 HBCUs actively in the United States. I went to one of the predominant bigger ones. Most of the HBCUs are in the southern part of the United States, mostly near the east, because you got to think about many Black Americans come from that side of town. Many of us growing up said, what is white dominance in your opinion? When I think about that type of stuff, man, great question to you, Warren. That is means from it could be from economical, it could be from spiritual, it could be from mental, it could be a lot of different perspectives. We could dive into that shortly though. But let me keep going. I definitely want to get back to what you're saying. When you're talking about HBCUs, right, and where they are placed strategically in the South. If you did not know, if you're a Black person living in America, you're in a major city. I don't care what major city you're a part of. Your ancestral legacy comes from Louisiana, Florida, South Carolina, Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, whatever. Every single one of your ancestral lineage, 90% of them come from the South. So when you talk about why are all the schools there, that is where most of the historical framework comes from. When I talk about the historical framework, I'm talking about where are these historical moments. Think about Jim Crow. Think about lynchings. Think about freedom towns. Think about all of those type of aspects and things that you are supposed to be learning at these institutions. Many of these institutions have studies called Africana studies. Historically, all of us ancestrally come from Africa. 100%. We know that. Millions of years ago, you know about the story of Africa. The mother was founded in East Africa. That's where the central beginning of the world was founded. True. But since the past 500 to 600 years, there has been so much history in America that Black Americans have never been taught about. And what I found incredibly shocking is that HBCUs do not teach it. They teach Africana studies. They teach African history, which is true. We should learn that. But it took me and my father to emphasize, man, it's so much history that has happened in America over the past 400 years that if you ask the average Black person about it, they have no idea about the studies. So one thing that I love to tell people as I dive into these subjects, when you talk about history of America, what do you know? First thing they'll say is slavery. We had slavery in this country. True. Incredibly important. They were slaves, yada, yada, yada. That's how we were. Transatlantic slave trade. True. But if you ask and make them go deeper, like myself, I asked them a follow-up question. I asked them, if you had to guesstimate how many actual slaves that we had that were literally transferred to the Americas, what would you think? I let them pause for a second. And I say, hey, if you have a percentage or a number that came to North America where you currently live, could you give me a percentage? They sit back and they think, and they sit back to me. They say, well, at least a lot. People are shocked when they see this number. Did you know that 3% of the transatlantic slave trade came to North America? Did you know that 3% of the transatlantic slave trade came to North America? Majority of the slave, 97%, 96.3, went to the Caribbean, Brazil, Central and South America. Let me say that again. 97% of the transatlantic slave trade went to Brazil, Caribbean, Central and South America. So if we know that many percent of the actual transatlantic slave trade did not touch place in North America, where did we get a lot of these Black people from? Now, I'm not here to speculate on where you think your image came from, ethnicity. What we have to understand is that a lot of us migrated here at different parts in history. Some of them could be native. Some of them came through the transatlantic slave trade. But most of the people's histories are very unique and different. When we talk about these points in history, we're taught a broad stroke, as in everybody came from Africa. We all came from one time. When historically evidence speaking, that is not true. As you take a deep dive into history, think about this. 300,000 people came to North America. We are 40 million Black Americans, roughly 40 to 50 million right now. Even if you did a mathematical number, it would be impossible to double those numbers in the past 400 years. It would be impossible. So you have to understand, a lot of people were actually natives, born here, commuted here, went over here before and prior to the slave trade. So once you get that understanding in your framework, your mind starts to work differently already. You start to think, man, if only 3% of people came here at that position in time, where did the other people come from? Then your mind and your historical knowledge starts to explode and explain. Number two, method that I think most people should know. 3% of people came to the Americas, right? The rest, we know, went south. So most Mexicans, Guatemalans, Caribbeans, Brazilians are true African ancestry. Most North American Black Americans are not. As I move on to my next point, as we talk about Black history, if we talk about Black history, y'all, and we mention points and referencing points, the number one thing most people will always mention is slavery. Slavery is a huge deal. It is a huge thing that happened in America. I'm not trying to underplay it or understand it at all. But if I asked you that what happened after slavery, they would immediately go to Jim Crow. Most people are generally shocked when I mention the story of convict leasing. If you ask someone what is convict leasing, they have no idea what that is. Convict leasing is a system where you were forced to go to prison and work manual labor until you die. These are the system that they had where if you were arrested in the state of Louisiana for a minimal crime, you will be forced to work on a railroad in Georgia as the state leased you out as property. Most people have no idea about this concept, and it went on for 90 years. Convict leasing is literally how people after slavery got their rights to build up their countries. If you look at many of the railroad companies, the banking industries, and other sorts of companies got built off of free labor, this is how they got established in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Did you know that? Did you know that convict leasing is the exact thing that the film called Life that Eddie Murphy and them discuss are talking about? That they got locked up for a crime they didn't do. And as they got locked up later on, the sentence got reduced. Let me give you a picture and imagery to familiarize your mind. It was a film that was made to be funny, right? We see the movies called Life and we think, man, it's funny. It is a joy to watch. It was. But many people have no idea that this film called Life was reality. This was 100% real story. Life was a true tragedy about two brothers wrongfully convicted, that they did life in prison for something they had no just due and had no justification for. This was a story of convict leasing. Did you know that? Did you know that this was so common that we see it in the South until this day? Convict leasing is literally when you be taking away your family for nothing. You didn't do the crime and they would over sentence you. This is why we hear them statements, harsher sentencing people until this day. Most people don't understand that these type of things linger around. They linger around and the spirit is festering until this very time. So when you see this movie called Life, one of my people watching right now, I want you to watch it again. And I want you to watch it with a mind understanding, number one, this is a great film. Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence do their thing. Shout out to those brothers. But most tragedies are made in film and appear as laughter. But this film is truly sad because all of those men that were incarcerated were due for petty crimes, theft, petty larceny. Think about it. You have brothers doing 15 years for stealing less than $200. 15 years. These are the sentiments of what convict leasing happened in the South. That's why a lot of people that migrated during the Great Migration never wanted to come back home. Number one, you can always reference these type of story of catching New York City blacks in small towns and giving them extra crime and time was very common. Most people don't realize that that's why that disconnection portion of most people in metropolitan cities have with their smaller town communities. I am from a small town, right? My family never strayed away or left. My family mostly stayed in those smaller areas as we grew up. When you meet people in the Chicago, the New York, the DCs, the Phillies, you will always know that many of those do not have a connection of where their ancestral lineage come from. Why? Cost of living, money, but also convict leasing. Many times when people lived in those bigger cities, they feared going back home because literally, man, going back home, making a wrong turn, you could do 10 years in prison. You can do time that will get you incarcerated, and now they will hurt you and see it as a different form of media. D for Divine says, now that I'm older, I saw a documentary that was watched as comedy. It is less tragedy of all. Absolutely. Absolutely. 1000%, y'all. as you see these movies and you see the opening acts of what they got going on, you got to understand they're making it a comedy, but it is really a horror story. I'm going to give you a great example, y'all. When I talk to many Black American men, especially that live in Houston, a lot of them live in Houston, Texas, right? A lot of their families are in other parts, Shreveport, Louisiana. Do you know how many of them have never been to their hometown, small town? Do you know how many of them have never seen their aunts, uncles in those small town locations? The reason why that disconnect is there is because many people don't understand it was dangerous to go back home. It was dangerous to be in those type of environments and traveling back and forth. So literally during those periods of the Great Migration, that's what made those separations so much more immediate, so much more severe, and so much more cunning when those incidents tend to happen. I want to go back again, y'all. Anytime you hear something when we talk about American history, we always mention slavery. Slavery is usually the first thing that we hear everyone mention, discuss, and talk about. Many people, hardly anybody, educated or not, will mention Convict Lisa. And like I said, master's degree, working on educated, HBCU, read a lot. There is not many Black people in general that know about this subject. If you ask them, they have no idea why. If they live in major cities, if you ask them where they come from, many of them have no idea why their family never go back to their small town. They'll literally say to you, well, I'm from Houston. I'll always ask them a deeper question. Yes, you're from Houston, right? I get it. But where is your ancestral lineage from? Because the state of Texas was a sundown town. If you don't know what a sundown town is, I'll make sure to break that down. A sundown town was a place where it was literally unacceptable for Black people to go. So when you talk about these type of states and these type of cities, you weren't even allowed to go there. So when they look at you, they'll kind of squint their eyes for you, like, what you mean, man? So a lot of people say, hey, I'm from this part of place. I'm from this side of town. I'm from this. No, you're not. Most of the time, you move there due to that point in history in your life. Many of y'all come from different isolated communities. I'm going to go ahead and break that word down. I think it's very important. When you hear the word sundown town, what most people don't understand is that sundown towns are places literally where you cannot travel or go to at night. There's a phenomenal book by the author James Lowe titled Sundown Towns, y'all. We do not realize that most sundown towns are in the Midwest, Chicago, Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, all of those places in the East Coast. Sundown towns are most likely not in the South. Why? Because most Black people live in the South. And it's hard for you to isolate a Black community in the South by saying you cannot get there. But in the state of Indiana alone, there were over 2,000 cities that were considered sundown towns. Most people have no idea about these concepts. So when you move to these certain locations and you feel that presence and energy, you must reconstruct history and know why. And I want you to think about it again. When have you ever learned about this stuff in your Black history class? When have you learned about any of this in your study, in your development, what things you should know, or what things you should find interesting about? Man, I want to do something that I think most Black people, especially if you have a desire to learn about yourself, your ancestry, your background more, number one you think you need to do, y'all, is find knowledge yourself. How do you find knowledge yourself? I'm going to go ahead and give you, hey, Warren jumping in. Forrest Gump did give a lot of information in that documentary. That is actually true. One thing I want y'all to jump on, y'all, right now. If you have your computer, laptop, phone in front of you, I want you to download this website. This website is titled FamilySearch.org. It is a completely free website where you can start your genealogy search and research development. This right here is the family tree that I've placed all the way back to 1750 for my mother, my father, my paternal, both sides, all four sides of your family. Remember, you got your mother's side, which would be your mother's mother, your mother's father. You had your father's mother and your father's father's side. What you can do on this website is called a deep dive into your genealogy. Your genealogy will literally give you a breakdown on your family's history. You can't just do it all from the internet. The internet will give you a phenomenal starting point because it will pull banking records, it will pull dental, it will pull housing deeds, it will pull marital license. If you have military family members, it can pull all of that information. I have gotten all the way back to around 1625, y'all. And what made me get started on this process is that during the family reunion, I want to host a family reunion for my side of the family, right? It was something I talked to my mom about. But in my family, the one thing we don't discuss is business and extreme detailed information on where you come from. So I got inspired to do this while in grad school, while, with my wife and everything. But what inspired me to do this type of information is, number one, most people cannot explain thoroughly. I know part of my history, my family and my fathers and them talked about it, but thoroughly, I wanted to give an accurate and present account. And the three things that I found the most shocking on my side of the family is, number one, my father's side. My father never knew his father, y'all. My father was of a product of an exterior marriage affair. My father's father was a Black Panther. My father never knew that. I got to find that closing piece of information for my dad. I got to find out where my dad's side of the family actually came from. My dad's mother migrated to New York City. My grandfather was already married. You know how they was back in the day, y'all. Had a bow with my dad. My dad is actually the baby out of his siblings, and my father never saw a picture of his dad, never got to meet his father, never got to have any conversations or touch him. And what I got to do, y'all, literally this past month, is to get to close that chapter for him. My father never got to meet his father, but being his boy, I got to give him that privilege to have that. Now, we are in that process of finding his siblings so he can reach out and connect in his way that he feels comfortable. He's a 50-year-old man, and he's never met his siblings or knew who his father was, but I gave him that point. But the point of emphasis I want to add to this, y'all, is that everybody should know exactly where they come from. I'm going to do my mother's side because I did that most recently. My mother's side of the family are descendants of American slaves. My mother's side of the family actually did not all come from slavery. My mother's side of the family were freedmen from Mount Pleasant, Tennessee. Most people don't realize that everybody wasn't a slave back in the day. Some people were already freedmen. They never were conquered. They never got colonized, any of that stuff. My mother's side of the family, right, come from Mount Pleasant, Tennessee. His brother worked on the Polk Plantation. The Polk Plantation was the plantation owned by former 8th President of the United States, James K. Polk. Look it up. In Mount Pleasant, Tennessee. His brother was held captive under James Polk, plantation. He earned his freedom during the war period in time. Keep going on, Civil War, the South taking over the South from the Confederacy, when the Confederacy Army was trying to overthrow and keep slavery intact, when the Northern Union soldiers won because of the Black Americans helped them at the time. My mother's grandfather, I'm just calling him James Crowder. James Crowder earned his land allotments and relocated his family to Monroe, North Carolina. He relocated to Monroe, North Carolina. You got to understand, at the time, he never really had a last name. Everybody just went by their first name, their surname. So literally, my last name was invented by James K. Crowder. He invented his last name, Crowder, as he relocated to Monroe, North Carolina. When they lived and established themselves post the Civil War in Monroe, North Carolina, that's when we see my family start to emerge and catapult and grow. You saw a freedom town was formed. You saw people moving up north to working in factories, moving in different places and elements. All of this research was shown through myfamilysearch.org. How you have to do this. The online portion is just an entry point. You start there. What you got to do after you start that entry point, y'all, you got to literally go to that town. I had to go to Mount Pleasant, Tennessee. Ain't nothing there, y'all. But I got to see the plantation. Do not be afraid to go to plantations, y'all. Number one, it's amazing. It's amazing to see the architecture that they built. It's amazing to see the development that happened. It's amazing to see what they overcame. We think of slavery, again, as the context as oppression they didn't do. I think of it as overcoming. What the family members had to go to overcome that type of environment is simply amazing. How they built, how they developed, how they cooked, how they innovated. All of that was off the formerly enslaved victim of that county. So as you begin to go there, I had to go to Mount Pleasant, Tennessee, literally the family location for the James Crowder family is still over there. It's still intact. I got to see firsthand what that real estate looked like. I got to see the local Black churches, the local Black communities. I got to visually see 400 years of research in real time. And as you see those things, your mind starts to open up and say, dang, I was told that all my family were enslaved, but my peoples had land. They had real estate, they had crops, he was never enslaved. He was a freedman the whole time. Wait a minute. I was taught that in history that most of us come from slaves. Some of us do. A lot of us do not. Wait a minute. I always had my own lifestyle, always had my own land. Is this what my mother and father meant? They weren't worried because they didn't physically have to integrate and do as much. They already had. As you begin to reconstruct your family, you learn that type of stuff. You learn that, man, some of the history was taught with a broad brush. It doesn't mean it's accurate. Yes, a lot of us did come from the period of enslavement. However, a lot of us were not. A lot of us were native. Some of them have native this. A lot of history points that we were not taught starts with finding out where exactly your family came from. I want all of my people, I'm going to put it in the chat, FamilySearch.org. Start there. Start with pulling up your information. Start with pulling up your records. Start with learning exactly where your family goes from. I'm going to go ahead and break it down how the website can be broken down, y'all. This is First Ancestry. You can have descendant chart. You can, you can have descendant chart. Let me sign back in for a second. All right, let me get it back in. You can have descendant charts, right? You can have portrait landscape mode. You can have so many ways that you can look in real time and see where your family is coming from. Some of these dates may be a little bit inaccurate, y'all, right? But what I want y'all to see is as you go from a bird's eye view, you can see exactly where your family members went. You can see exactly how they were born. You can see your spouses. You can see their histories. You can take a deep dive and see where they were born, what side of town, where they may have grown up, where they lived, where was the mortgage. Everything could be observed and viewed when you download this website, y'all. I mean that. This website right here is such a phenomenal starting point. You all need to do it. Start here. If you do not know your family's legacy, number one, ask your elders. Ask your elders, hey, we always lived here, we lived somewhere else. They will tell you, no, we lived here, we lived there. A lot of my elders had no idea about the Mount Pleasant, Tennessee. They were 100% accurate on Monroe, North Carolina. Many of them were not as equipped to handle the documentation of Mount Pleasant, Tennessee, and dive deep forward. Many of them did not know 100% information on what it was, but I want y'all to understand, getting those starting points and building from it will guide you in the right direction. As we keep diving down this video, I'm going to do the second half, y'all, called our post-game speech, to really dive in to the Black American points of history that you need to know. Right now, I just went into why is it all Africana studies? We discussed genealogy. We discussed breaking down a history in its proper context. We also discussed if it was true that we all came from the same slave trade, why did only 3% of African Americans, as the term they use, I think that's a little bit outdated term. You'll hear me use the little term Black American because a lot of the times that is not emphasized as much. A lot of us do not come from Africa, y'all. A lot of us history has been 400 years in this country. We need to emphasize where we're from, highlight what makes us different, and celebrate each other. That's the main thing I want to emphasize and teach today, y'all, is make sure we emphasize your history, not just mine, your history, your scholars, your leaders, and having that pride to know, hey, man, this is the history of us, where our family has been, and I want us to continue to go where we're going to go. So I want everybody to spend this time to make sure you go to that website. I want you to register right now. I just dropped it in the chat, FamilySearch.org. And while I want everybody to download that, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to sign in. And once we get signed in, then we're going to get heavy on the current history we all should learn. I want all of us to dive into what equipment you should have to talk about scholars you should know and people that affect us currently. So, again, I'm going to turn up the vibes. I'm going to take my break. And when I come back, we going in heavy, all right? That's all I want y'all to know. So, thank y'all. Be safe. Be back in 5. And then. Man, thank y'all for having me back, man. I had to take that little break, get my fluids in me. I want to make sure I come in hot, man. I hope that information was very valuable to y'all. We always get taught, do your history, do your history. Nobody ever gives you that step-by-step process. What I want to do, man, as a young professional guy, we're all the same. I'm y'all, just do a little bit of the work. I want y'all to have the tools to get you to step 2, to get you to step 1. That family search, man, will get you to step 1 that you're looking for. Trust me. We all need that guidance tool. We all need that guiding element. We all need that to literally get us to the point we want to low. Man, Warren is on fire again. He said, tell you about King Solomon in history. That's too much, man. You got to start with breadcrumbs, my brother. Don't overwhelm people. Give them a little bit so they can learn. Give them a little bit so they can earn a little bit, right? Warren said, man, King Solomon should be taught in history. Black Americans taught about Christopher Columbus and his thugs. He's absolutely right, by the way. If you do not know that, make sure you look up that gentleman he's dropping in. Shout out to Warren for that, man. Let me highlight one of my points right there, familysearch.org. If you did not get a chance to look at it, please, please, please get onto that website. It's free. Use your Gmail. Save the information. Start the process. Start your peace of mind. Now that we back, y'all, the phenomenal thing about where we are currently in the state of the culture, I'm in the culture, y'all, right? I'm in there. The beautiful thing about where we are is that we can build. People always look at it as a negative thing. I look at everything we're currently at as a positive. Why? Because the canvas is clean. It's empty. It's bare. It's low. That means that it can be built upon what could be developed. The number one thing that we could learn is that there is a gap of information. We got to understand. I like to break down stuff for y'all, right? We got to understand during that period of integration of the schools, what happened to all of our APs, administrators, principals, builders of most high school, intermediate schools? They were gone. They were literally, jobs just vanished. They were gone. When those jobs vanished out, you must understand all of their root of information that was taught, self-esteem, Black art, the Black history in America, people, all of that was gone. So what we have to do right now that we've seen, because, you know, I'm a reflective guy, right? You look back over your shoulders, you see the current state, you see what most kids don't know. History guru is me, y'all. Most people have no idea about the knowledge of where they come from, where they are, what they want to know. Most, especially teenagers, high school, younger males, always ask, could you teach me more about where we come from? I make sure to drop nuggets, speak on life and things that matter. That is what you must learn. A lot of the times, people have no idea of what we've done, what you're doing, or what's going on. So let's go ahead and break it down, man. I love to give an idea on what the timeline of what it is, right? When we always speak on Black history, we always start when slavery comes to North America, right? But when we speak on this period of coming to North America, remember, 3% came to North America. 3%. What about the others that were in the Midwest, in the West, in the South that were not integrated as well? We got to understand this history is spoken primarily in the schools that we see. It's primarily a, European-centric standpoint. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you got to understand when they're speaking to each other. So when you hear the terms founded America, they're speaking to each other about getting to a new land that may have already been there. You can't found something people were at, right? So you got to understand mentally where that comes in at history. Yo, they were talking to each other. We knew we found a new land. Christopher Columbus founded a new land. Technically, he didn't, right? We know that, right? People are already here. You can't find something people here. But they were speaking to each other on those incidents. As we fast forward, when a new colony, right, as we learned, were being established, people came to this country and they were trying to rise in economic and manufacturing hubs. You must understand that when the cotton industry was so strong, that was primarily at the hand of most enslavement people at this time. As they were developing and building cotton, most people do not understand the reason why it was such a strong hold on making sure cotton remained strong. It was the number one export. It was such a strong commodity that it made countries, states, and people phenomenally rich. If you want to see on my other channel, other videos that I have speaking about the daughters of Confederacy, Confederacy armies, you can speak on how history has been taught differently than what it truly is. The South wanted to keep the economic union strong because, number one, they didn't need the union side of America. The South was anti-America, y'all. They did not need the North because they had their labor, they had their military bases, they had their strong point, and they had a strong economy. What did the Confederate, which was not the United States, need with that? They honestly didn't. They were literally trying to exercise themselves by saying, we are segregating from you, meaning that we are no longer going to be a part of the state. Think about this for a second. Think about if the states in the South right now said, I do not want to be a part of the South. I'm no longer going to honor your laws. I'm no longer going to listen to you. We are separated and do what we want. Think about how traumatic of an event they had to be to hear that at the time. You were living in this country and people from another side of the state saying, we're no longer listening. Wouldn't that be traumatic, y'all? Wouldn't that be scary, I say? That's how traumatic that incident was that we do not think about. A starting point. We always speak about the Nat Turner Rebellion, right? Nat Turner was a rebellion, but we don't speak about the other rebellions that happened around this time. There was some with the Gullah Geechee. There was some with the Creole family. There was some with the slave routes going south. We only hear one perspective throughout most history class. Why was the Nat Turner Rebellion such a big deal? It lets you know that what you were doing to these individuals in Black history, to people that were captive and slaves, they were responding. The reason why the Nat Turner subject is such a big deal, if you're in the 757, stand up. If you're in the 433, stand up. This part of history lets you know that these people were shocked to see how Nat Turner and his members went around killing people. Abolitionists in the Underground Railroad, as we begin to go up through history, right? Love to give you that timeline to catch on. Abolitionism was a huge deal. Abolitionists, were a huge deal. Most people have no idea that the Underground Railroad was north and south. Did you know that the Underground Railroad went south? Did you know that the Underground Railroad had a southern place in Florida where it was completely free? In the South, it was freedom in the South, y'all. The land masses of the state was free because it was Spaniard rule. Prior to the year before we bought Florida from Spain, Florida was 100% free. If you do not believe me, I advise you to go to the channel again. Look up the Seminole Wars. The Seminole Wars were wars where free Black men were going into because they refused to go back into slavery. So the people that were held captive, PWOs, products of war, right? Prisoners of war, were held captive against their wills. When they would escape free from the plantations in the South, they would always say, have you ever looked at how far the North was from the South to get there? I always wondered that in class, like, how did they get there with no cars, no virtual land, escape from the land? How would they get all the way north? Did we really think that was possible? No. A lot of the time they went south. St. Augustine, Fort Moose. Look up the history on the Underground Railroad of the South. The South in Florida, y'all, was free. The South in Florida was free. Most people have no idea that that was true or accurate. As we keep going on around history, as we keep going on, the famous case of Dred Scott. Remember how I mentioned earlier that my grandfather was a freedman? Dred Scott was a freedman who went into a state to get something type of good or something, was held captive as a freedman. And they went to the Supreme Court to argue against this decision. And on the Supreme Court, justice said, no Negro, Black man, NIGGR, can have any decision to hold captive for thinking or do anything for himself. They said in the Supreme Court, no Black person, no matter freed or not, has rights in this country. Let me say it again. The Dred Scott court case was such a monumental decision because it said, even if you were born, even if you were Black in this country, you have no rights, no jurisdiction. We can only think and operate for you. Learn these time marks of how history is going. Remember, this is 1864, 1857, around this time. As you keep going and keep gathering yourself. Now, let's keep moving. John Brown. John Brown was the most famous abolitionist who should have a movie about himself that will be produced, y'all. He should have a movie and a statue. John Brown was the most famous abolitionist. Not only was he an abolitionist, y'all, he killed white folk. Did y'all know that John Brown led a raid on Harper's Ferry Drive that actually had him and his sons murdered because he thought the justice of slavery was so horrible? This is the time frame of history that you must learn. Look at all these events that have happened one after another. Did you know any of these things? Did you know about the Underground Railroad North and South? Did you know about the Harper's Ferry Candy? Did you know about John Brown and what his legacy was? Did you know how detailed and how strong of an abolitionist he was? Did you know he knew Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, all of those leaders at this time? John Brown, during his time period of living, y'all, was the most integrated man that lived in America. Did you know that? He lived among black people his entire life. He probably had the most integrated lifestyle of anybody during this time period. John Brown, look him up. As we continue to go down, we got the slavery and Civil War, right? We all discussed that. Post-slavery in the South, Reconstruction period. Post-slavery in the South was when the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment got free. Remember, 13th Amendment abolished slavery. The 14th Amendment saying all men equal protection under the law, going against that Dred Scott decision. Remember, Dred court case was so controversial because people argued that we don't have the same rights. You are a different ethnicity. You don't have the same rights as a white person at this time. That's why the 14th Amendment was such a huge deal, because it allowed everyone to have equal protection under the law, due process, right to it. You know, all the rights and stuff we hear all the time. That is where those things come up. So remember, Civil War, Reconstruction. Reconstruction was not Reconstruction. If you look at it again, we'll break it down in another video. All of these elements go into why these things were such a big deal. Next, what most people do not understand about American history. The Plessy v. Ferguson decision was such a big deal. And I get pushback from this all the time. I'm going to tell you what I get pushback about. Most people disagree with me when I say we don't have colorism in this country. What you mean? You know, we hear the gender, the colorism. In the United States of America, we do not have colorism. They look at me. There is no mulatto class in this country. There is black or white. This court case in 1896 made it that way. Most people do not understand. In Louisiana, with the Creoles, there was a mulatto element in class spurring up in Louisiana. Many black Americans, black people that were born around this time, that may have been product of mixing with each other. There was a mixed class that was above poor white folk. What most people don't realize is that when that issue started to spur around in Louisiana about, hey, I am partial white, I deserve better class because I'm partial white and I have money. What people don't understand is that this court decision stroked down any colorism issues, debate, everything that you may ever hear in this country. There is colorisms in some parts of the Caribbean, some parts of Africa, South America. That is true. But in America, it does not matter what color ethnicity you are. There is literally a hard white or a black line. Plessy v. Ferguson made this very clear, because most people do not understand is that they made everything separate. They made sure they said, hey, if you got one drop of Negro blood, the one drop rule, 132nd, because if you look at the guy, Plessy versus Ferguson, in that court case, he was a very fair-skinned guy. But he tried to sit and be above poor whites. They got so angry in the city of New Orleans that they said, no, you will never be treated as much as us. That's when that whole ideology, I might be a lot of things, but I ain't black. That is where that came from. That ideology came from the Plessy v. Ferguson court decision. So when you hear those type of things in America specifically, there is no mulatto class. There is no I'm light-skinned class. There is no this class. In America, we're very hyper. Either you're black or you're white. They made it very clear in this court decision. Again, it was a mulatto movement scurrying around. But once this came out, y'all, all that's dead. They let you know throughout the whole country, you're a black person, you're a white person, end of the story. So I want all people to know that in their mind, whenever you hear that colorism talk in America, there is no such thing. This court decision, read the documents, understand what they said. They made it very clear. They don't care if you're light-skinned black, you're black, whatever. They all call you the same words. They all refer to you as a ninja. Plain as day. Legally written documents. All of that, they do not care. That is why we see people from other countries come here and struggle with that, because in other countries, there is that mulatto, I'm this class. In America, there is none. Moving on. When you see that type of court case, then you'll understand why the movement started. You begin to see the NAACP when it was founded, the Anti-Discrimination Bill, Marcus Garvey, the Harlem Renaissance era. You begin to see different parts of history begin to grow and prosper. You begin to see its own rights. You begin to see integration, and then you begin to see the early seeds of the civil rights movement. Hopefully you're catching up. I want you to think about all of that history we just discussed, y'all, in less than 15 minutes. And I haven't even gotten to our scholars. If I asked you, as a black person right now in America, could you name all of those events in detail what I just told you? Be honest. Has there been any class in this country that you have taken where they've taken a deep dive into the Dred Scott decision or the Plessy v. Ferguson decision? Has there been any class in this country that breaks down why America's race issues are so different than any other place in the world? Most of the time, I'm going to tell you no. They never dive into why that is the way it is. We'll just hear it. And mind you, y'all, working with students, I've been there. I've literally had to tell students myself, and they live right here and they argue with me. I tell them, there is no colorism in this country. They'll look and they'll pause and they'll say, that doesn't make any sense. I say, there's preferences. There is. But when you say colorism, you must understand there is a caste system to say, if I look this way, I will be treated different. And in America, they treat you all the same. There is no mulatto movement. Now, when you begin to see later years come, you begin to see integration occur. That is when you begin to see those type of things. Jackie Robinson was it's a monumental idea. I love what Jackie Robinson stood for, but I'll give you the sidebar with it. My father, super, power to the people. He doesn't like these integrationist individuals. He thought Jackie Robinson did us a disservice by tanking the Negro League. So, depending on what perspective, again, I always say it's one perspective and it's another one. Some people have mixed reviews about the history of these type of individuals. Jackie Robinson gets praised in some circles, and in others, he gets criticized for what he did and how he tanked the league and not did forward. As we go down, this court decision has been talked about, but I don't think it's been broken down a lot. Did you know that Brown v. Board of Education took place in Topeka, Kansas? It was a phenomenal court study. Thurgood Marshall did his job about the differential studies between children, sociology, mentally, how they view themselves. What most people do not understand, we still ain't integrated. Urban schools have been integrated. Did you know in 1974 in Detroit, Michigan, there was a law banning suburban schools from being integrated? Milken v. Bradley decision, look it up. In 1974 in Detroit, Michigan, why do you think most suburban schools have never been integrated? Why do you think it's only urban schools where black children went where you see most of the integration happening? Do you see integration towards schools in your suburb areas? No. Do you see mass people going there to go to school at the schools that are doing exceptionally well? No. Have you noticed that the only schools that are truly integrated are our urban, overpopulated schools? This court case decision did a phenomenal job. Reading the notes, did what Thurgood Marshall, Mr. Washington, all the members did. They did a phenomenal job explaining why we needed integration in some of the school system. What they did not see and did not see coming up, they did not see that there was going to be an exodus movement towards integration towards our suburban schools. Because what they did was we just segregated again. Our suburban schools are mostly where we see a certain demographic, certain type of lifestyle. But when you look at it, why don't you see more kids that are struggling in these bigger schools being forced to go out there? Why do we see kids that are underperforming go to the same schools in urban areas that are lack of funding instead of going to the certain schools out there? Why do we not see that? Because they don't have to integrate. If you do not believe me, 1974, Detroit, Michigan, Milken versus Bradley court decision, suburban schools have never been integrated until this day. This court decision was a milestone for urban schools. But the suburban schools, the ones in the county, have not been integrated. That is why you see the test number skewed, the staff skewed, all of the information being changed because it has not changed until this day. Let's keep moving on. As we keep breaking down our history, we see the tragic story of Emmett Till. Tragedy, man. This young man was 14 years old. What they did to him was horrific. None of them went to jail for it. The lady passed away this previous year, never went to jail for it. They created a movie about this gentleman while the lady that killed him and was involved in the murder was still living. I have so many mixed emotions about this subject that it's shocking. But to know that a 14-year-old boy could be murdered and executed in broad daylight in the street, and his family had that open-ended casket, and the gentleman that did this crime never went to prison for a long stint, it doesn't sit right for me. A 14-year-old young man died, murdered, killed, and we had a film come out about him in the law that was going to justify him and still going. I got a soft spot for this story, man. It's so horrific that I don't even want to dive into it, man. Just know prayers for the Till family. Still ain't right. As we keep going, Rosa Parks was not the first nor the only one that had the boys boycott. She was the most infamous because remember, due to the Montgomery boycott in Montgomery, allow us to overthrow the bus system. Look at how much history again that we are diving into right now. If I asked you to take a deep analytical view before we even get to our scholars, could you? I'm gonna say no. Let's keep going. As Rosa Parks, the Central High School integrated group, the Little Rock Nine. Again, we see integration in urban school. Loving versus Virginia. Most people have no idea that Miss Loving was a Native American. She wanted to date her white husband. This is actually a Native American story. Did you know that? Loving versus Virginia was a Native American story about a woman that wanted to marry her white husband, which she definitely should have had the right to do. Loving versus Virginia. Learn the story. Read the analytical data on exactly what happened. This is what allowed marriage to be legal. Integrated marriages were a big thing. The SNCC movement, CORE and the Freedom Riders. Let me keep going. Integration of Ole Miss, the Birmingham church bombings. What most people do not know about this story right here. Did you know that once the Birmingham church bombings happened, did you know that later on, the bodies of those young ladies were stolen due to a grave stealing incident? Did you know that grave stealing was still a big deal and still is a big deal in the South right now? Did you know that several years when their families wanted to relocate their bodies, the caskets were empty? Truly horrific. Let's keep diving. As we continue to go, Martin Luther King needs no explanation. Mississippi Burners, the March on Selma, Malcolm X death and spawn. Woo! The Voting Rights Act, the rise of the Black Panther Party. I'm gonna take a deep dive into them and how much they did. The Fair Housing Act, the assassination, the murder of Martin Luther King, Shirley Chisholm. Let's keep going. Affirmative action, Jesse Jackson, Oprah, the Watts riots, Milton Man March, Colin Powell, Barack Obama, BLM, George Floyd protests. Before I keep going on to any of that stuff, that was just an overview of our great scholars. Let me give you a scholar that I bet most people have no idea who he is and how great this brother was, man. If I asked the average person who was the great chairman Fred Hampton, could they tell you? Could they tell you in detail why this brother was such a predominant leader? If I told you that he was cool with all the Chicago gang leaders, King David, all of those guys at the time, would you believe me? If I told you that even though he was a politically conscious brother who died at the age of 21, 22, would you believe me? Even though he was politically conscious, Fred Hampton knew that the streets had to be serviced. Do you know he was a political revolutionary that broke down how we need to integrate not just one side of our society, but politically, mentally, spiritually, having a leadership capacity to unify Chicago. Chicago was one of the most unified and structured cities in America. Chicago was strictly enforced by a code. Chicago's leadership was the strongest in this country. Did you know that? Chairman Fred Hampton, the God. This brother right here had a quote that I use until this day. Politics is war without bloodshed. Politics is war without bloodshed. Let me say it one more time. Politics is war without bloodshed. If you do not know who the scholar is, you have not learned anything about Black history. Chairman Fred was the first one to unionize, stabilize, and emphasize a radicalization of not only the streets, but understand that politics was a big deal. When we hear the Black Panther Party and how we're taught in school, we're not taught that they started clinics. We're not taught that they taught protecting yourself. We're not taught that they were with the gangster crowd. Again, when you hear the word King David in Chicago, did you know him and Fred Hampton was like that? Did you know that he allied to say, hey, man, David, you can do these things, but it's your obligation to protect the ladies on the street. It's your obligation to protect people once they're going through crimes. It's your obligation to teach, educate, and make sure you help those that are going through tough times right now. Whenever we hear this type of talking about our scholars, we never hear this guy mentioned. We never hear him. We never hear Fred Hampton. Even the movie that came out recently, y'all remember that movie, Judas and the Black Messiah? It wasn't about Fred. It was about the guy that told on him. It wasn't about what he did and how he changed the landscape of America. This brother was executed, killed, murdered, shot, whatever you want to say. What I am saying is that there's so much Black American history that is so undertaught. If you ask a brother in Chicago right now who Fred Hampton is, Chairman Fred, I guarantee they can't tell you. I guarantee they can't tell you his quotes. I guarantee they can't tell you that even though he was a very much conscious brother, how enlightened he was and how much he put on why the history of your movement is so strong, they can't tell you. They can't tell you the books, the narrative, the speeches, his connotation, how he carried himself, the unification, his family structure. These are the scholars you must learn. And all my classes at HBCU, I ain't never learned. I'm not denigrating Hampton, y'all. But they ain't teach this. We ain't learned this. I never learned about Chairman Fred until I read about him on my own and heard about from my father. My father didn't know that his father was a Black Panther. Have you ever heard in the open class who Fred Hampton was? He wasn't violent. He was structured. He was young. He was passionate. He had the streets on lock. He was that dude, and he was murdered in cold blood while taking medicine. He was drugged by an enforcement agency, allegedly. He was drugged and killed while he was asleep. If somebody asked you about this scholar, what he did and who he was, could you tell me? If somebody asked you what this scholar did for us, would you know? Would you? Seriously. If you had to tell me 5 things you knew about Fred Hampton right now on a test, would you pass? Would you? I'm going to say no. Moving on to our next scholar, leader, expert advisor that we should know. Make sure you hit the like button, y'all. Like, share, comment, subscribe to the channel. I'm coming to you with this fire. Black history, what you should know. It's your boy, King Crowder. I'm going to keep going in, y'all. Like, share, comment. Next up on the list is one of the greats that we don't talk about, one of our great scholars. Booker T. Washington, the founder, one of the founders of Hampton University, y'all. You know the reason why I love Booker T. Washington so much, y'all? There is not many people in the United States that had an economic plan for Black people besides him. People criticize him because he really said that we should be individualized to learn craftsman jobs. We should learn how to build, work with our hands. Booker T. Washington had an economic plan for us. Most people don't realize that. He founded a school, Tuskegee. He worked his way up. He had influence. He had an economic base. Man, the brother was very apolitical, very reserved, very quiet, didn't tell his beliefs a lot. But man, what was not to like about him? He hired George Washington Carver. He had multiple scholars at Tuskegee. He led people to get work. He showed them building plans. Booker T. Washington, in reality, was one of the last scholars that we know that had an economic plan for us. Did you know that? Did you know that Booker T. Washington plan was blue collar first? It wasn't white collar like W.E. Du Bois. Don't hate W.E. Du Bois, but I think his philosophy and where we are right now has got us messed up. Historically, Booker T was right. We need more tradesmen. We need more people working with their hands. We need more people to pull themselves up and build buildings, work, construction, and work. We need that. That is our greatest shortfall that this scholar taught us that we did not pick up. No matter what you thought about his politics, what he said, how he felt, his vision, we need to start implementing that again. Families, working, blue collar, love, forgiveness. Booker T. Washington implement that. If you ask the average person to name 5 things, the great things that Booker T. Washington did in his lifetime, could you name them? Could you name them? Could you name his books? Could you talk about his films Up from Slavery? Could you talk about how well traveled he was? Could you talk about where he lived at and where he walked to? Could you name anything about this gentleman, how much he mattered to the black community at this time? How he built these colleges? How he built blue-collar programs, technical schools, and universities? Do you know that? Do you know he founded one of the best HBCUs? Shout out to Tuskegee. Booker T. Washington did that, y'all. And it's history. Most people have no idea about. One of my favorites up next, scholar time, y'all. I'm just breaking down the scholars and who you should know. She's a woman. But she needs no big introduction, man. Her book is a mandatory must read for all of us. But Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, psychologist, mental expert, former professor at Howard, American psychologist, the goddess. Her book, ISIS Paper, phenomenal. But what she did so much, y'all, is she gave us a blueprint. We have enough blueprints from the Claude Andersons, many people speaking about it. We're at that point now that we don't even know who our scholars are. All men should read the ISIS Paper. All people in college, especially if you're black, should read the ISIS Paper. It is a real thing. No matter how you feel, what you think, the goddess Dr. Frances Cress Welsing deserves so much of her flowers. With information she gave, the candidates she spoke with, the pro-families, the ideology she spoke on. If you have no idea who this lady is, you need to learn her. Learn who she is. Google her books. Read them. Look at her films. Look at what she did. This lady right here, the great Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, icon, scholar, leader, black history we should have learned at your undergraduate universities or degree majors. She's one of them. Next up, we should learn, man. He needs no big introduction, but we all should be aware of him. The great Neely Fuller. The compensatory code teaches you how to work in corporate, teaches you power dynamics, teaches you how to deal with people that you may not understand. The great Neely Fuller is a writer, an author, a scholar. You should read both of these books. I don't want anything from y'all but y'all mind. Because once the mind changes, everything else will follow. The great Neely Fuller, them books, read both. Get them both. Listen to them both. Get a library card that's free and find them both. That bit of information that he spoke about, that he detailed and discussed, you can't buy that. Neely Fuller, an icon among us. You need to read him. This is one of the scholars we should have learned about during our HBCU experience that none of us were educated on. Neely Fuller. Look him up. Neely Fuller. Next up, man, I'm going to keep going down our list, y'all. This brother, everybody to help us don't have to be black all the time, y'all. They don't. This gentleman, I've read 4 of his books. Awesome historian. And he has books that I believe are some of the most influential things. The first book I've read by the great James Lowe It's lies told. Excuse me. Let me hit that. The first thing I read by the great James Lowe was lies told to me across school. Lies told to me. Most people have no idea how mind-blowing that is. We were told a lot of lies. We were. We were taught that the first people who came to America came from the East Coast. That's not true. The first people who came from America came from the West Coast. Think about it. They came from the West. So most of the French came when they came to the West Coast and went down. Christopher Columbus landed on America. No, he didn't. He landed in the Caribbean. He never set foot in North America. We were also taught that Lewis and Clark went over to the West Coast. No, they didn't. York landed them in the West Coast. Did you know about the former enslaved man named York? We were also taught that the countries and the agreements agreed with each other. No, they didn't. All of the history that we think we learned, it's not true. James Lowe talks down and breaks down piece by piece all of the things we learned throughout history that are completely inaccurate. We didn't learn about the Native history. We didn't learn about the integration policies. We didn't learn that Black Americans never received what's it called during the Theodore Roosevelt Reservation, that we never received those GI Bill loans. We never received that type of stuff. We never learned any of that stuff. We never learned how much race was a factor in history. As much as James Lowe, mind, he's a white guy. I read anybody that's a great scholar. This historian was phenomenal. His book called Sundown Towns mentions how every president we've had in America grew up in a sundown town. Every president we've had in America prior to Barack Obama grew up in a sundown town. What does he mean by that? None of them grew around any other people than white people. James Lowe highlights that majority of white Americans live in sundown towns, and they don't even see a problem with it. This historian broke down why we see so many documentations and why we have these problems. He broke down why aren't sundown towns and museums? Why aren't sundown towns being talked about right now? Why are sundown towns not being a main topic of conversation? Isn't that weird? We know they exist, but we just don't talk about them. We know that I grew up in my small town, y'all. Botetourt, Craig County, 30 minutes away, was a sundown town. Can you believe that? I remember an incident with my father, y'all, leaving from work when he used to work at Flat Rock. We come from work and we went to a place, and somebody asked us, "What are we doing here?" I remember that. I didn't know that was a sundown town. My father probably had no recollection we were in a sundown town. There's been no movement to educate us on that. That is a huge gap of Black history we do not learn. We don't learn about how this stuff affects us. You don't learn that when you go to sundown town, you need to have the right chain because they don't give you your money back. We don't learn that you can't afford to stop at these places that you got to go. We don't learn that people had to sleep in their cars rather than to stop because they knew if they went by a sundown town, they were looking for trouble. This has all happened in American history, but we never learned about this. Am I the only one fascinated by that? Am I the only one that's blown away by this gentleman highlighting how American history has been grossly undertaught? Am I the only one that ever heard of the Daughters of Confederacy, the Sons of a Confederacy, having influence over academic institutions in our curriculum? James Lowe highlighted that. Why do the Daughters of Confederates have influence over curriculum in the United States? Have you ever heard this term, the War of Northern Aggression? The Confederate soldiers weren't that bad. The Confederate flag is about my story and my history. Oh, it doesn't mean what you think it means. It's not bad. James Lowe dissects all of that. It's a flag of treason. The Confederates were treasonous. The Confederate Army did treason in this country. It wasn't me. He said that. Read his book and he breaks down that, how detailed and thorough that information is. This brother made me so much consciously aware of information I didn't know that we see in his history. And I'm going to ask again, how do I, a educated, I just use that word, y'all. I look at myself as a learner, a reader, a understander. I don't look at myself as no educated more than anybody else. How do me, a semi-educated person, not know this information? How do I not know that? And this author is breaking that down. I've never heard it in undergraduate and graduate and high school, middle school, elementary school. I never heard the word Sundown Town. And I live near one. How did I never learn that? That mind blown. When you hear this type of stuff, and then you go back and read the lies told through us throughout history, you realize how deep it is. You realize how much everything has been made up in ways. This brother's 4 books. I recommend you all get them. Put them in the chat. Throw them in the highlighter. James Lowe is an iconic writer among us. Let me keep going, y'all. I don't want to get too heavy. Next one, he's gonna be controversial. Some people may not like him. Some people use words about him, but I'm gonna tell you what, I learned a lot from him. Tariq Nasheed. No matter how you may feel, no matter what you may think, he teaches, man. He teaches. He inspires. He breaks down. He reminds me of Malcolm X as you see his progress. Remember, Malcolm had a history. We look at it, and they always say, I hear people say all the time, he was a pimp, he was this, he said, so what? Malcolm X was a real life pimp. He did 12 years in prison. He's a scholar. Tariq Nasheed speaks about a lot of real stuff. Good, bad, or indifferent, no matter if you agree or disagree. I can listen to somebody even if I disagree with them. I may not like everything he says. I may not like anything everybody says. But the knowledge that he spews, the information that he drops, the content that he gives, the information that he breaks down, amazing. Good, bad, or indifferent. How can you not respect this brother? Number one, I respect anybody that show me work. People that talk, people that do, I nod my head to them. Everybody talk, y'all. People that do get respect. He does. He works. His body of work, his filmography, his discography, his books, his work ethic, his raising his children, he's with his family. He's taking them to see real life historical events. Salute. I see better than I hear, y'all. People talk to me all day. Work ethic gonna show more than anything. I'm not the most smart, y'all. I'm just learning this YouTube thing. I'm just learning this social media thing. But I respect another man's work ethic. I will nod my head based off of what they're doing. To me, no matter what you think, no matter what the comments, whatever your cup of tea is, you have to respect this brother. Period. Listen. No matter if I disagree, I listen. I listen to 5 different things before I make a decision on anybody. I do. I listen to 5 different episodes, 5 different contents, 5 different messages you should spew. I try to do 5 of them before I make a message about anybody. Because I might not like what you're saying. I might not. But you could be helping me in a way that I don't know right now. And there's no reason for me to go against that. Tariq Nasheed, icon, respect, influence. I love what you do, brother. Wish I can. You inspire me to this day. Next up, controversial, passed away a few years ago, but I love this brother. His name, and I'm going over scholars we do not know, y'all. I'm not going over scholars we know like the Martin Luther Kings. We know about all of them. But these are scholars that I want to give small and planet roots for. Dick Gregory, comedian, activist, speaker, icon. Man, his messaging about health, business, and Black struggles, who passed away a few years ago, I would advise everybody to read his book, Nigger. Man, the brother was spitting fire. Fire! Good, bad, or ugly. Nobody spoke more about Black radical issues in the past recent years until this brother passed away was Dick Gregory. Loved him. Loved what he stood for. Remind me of my dad. My dad is Dick Gregory. He talked just like Dick Gregory. He cuss at you, yell at you, but he ain't lie to you. He scream at you, tell you what you need to do, but he ain't lie to you. Dick Gregory kept the truth. Good, bad, or indifferent. You cannot get mad with this elder. Read his books. Listen to his message. Listen to his scholarly tone. Listen to what he said. Listen to how he helped us. Listen to what he talked about. Dick Gregory, educate yourself on this man and what he did. Next, I got to end with a woman, the icon, the goddess, the queen. Extreme love of her content. Man, I was giving her book my freshman year of college. The Black Man's Guide to Understand the Black Woman. They don't make her like her no more, except for my wife. You know, she Queen Ali, she Queen Crowder. But this sister right here, if you are a black man in the dating scene, you need to read the book, The Black Man's Guide to Understand the Black Woman. If you are a parent and you want to know to your kids, you need to get the book. Things I wish my parent would have taught you about Shahrazad Ali. Wow. She is a scholar, a icon among us. What she taught on that made her so good was black families. That's where my heart is at, y'all. Work with kids. We always hear talks about wealth, everything else, but she hit at the issue that I think I need to focus more on. Black families. Black families is what we need to talk about. Everything she spoke about was about love, about how we're out of order, how our gender roles, our dynamics, everything that was done to us, we need to talk about. Slavery messed a lot of us up, y'all. Feminism messed a lot of us up. Being out of order, being out crazy, talking crazy, treating each other bad, messed us up. Mind you, her book came out in 1989 about the behaviors we currently see, about the sexy reds, about the behavior, about the outlooks, about how we do our hair, do this type of stuff. She spoke about this in 1989. The most current form of her, who was so controversial, R.I.P. to Kevin Samuels, he was a 2.0 version of her. Did you know that half his talking points came from Shahrazad Ali? They did. She the one that made that quote that white women go to college to find a man, black women go to college to prove they don't need one. She said that. She said that. And as an HBCU graduate myself, she was true. I don't know. I'm the one out of my freshman class of brothers I knew. Maybe two of us are married. Two out of the 100 or so. Two. 1, 2. I don't know many are. I listen to brothers and hear them about how hard the dating scene is. Everything she said in this book, written in 1989, is still true. The college-educated woman. The boss bae. I don't need no man ideology. The baby mama. The social structure. The feminist. I cannot highlight. If you do not know who she is, read everything she got. I got at least 6 books by her. 6. She is a icon among us. She's still living, by the way. Still living. Still kicking. Still breaking down the message. Still changing the world. But she was the first one that openly spoke out against feminism, anti-black misandry, and bad relationships that we see. We saw Kevin Samuels modernize it and make it on a social media platform. But what most people don't understand, she was the root of that. She was. She was. What I just broke down right now, y'all, was 10 scholars that we never learned about a single day during our Black history classes. Think about all the information we just broke down and chopped up in that little bit of period of time. Everything. Sundown Towns, authors, writers, books to read. All that information we broke down. No one ever taught us that. No one ever taught us the value of what we need to read outside of school. I don't want anything from you, y'all. Maybe want you to, look out for me anytime, but I want your mind. Once your mind is open, everything else changes, y'all. Once your mind is open, everything else changes. All of those scholars add something different to what we need to learn. Those scholars speak about family, about revolutionary mindset, about politics, excluding the scholars we all know about. We know about the big dogs. We know about the MLK. We know about the Malcolm X. We know about the big dogs. Did you know about those scholars that I gave to you that can prove perspective on everything else we may see happen? Most people cannot. Most people cannot break down why Black history is so undertaught and how even the graduates the talented 10th among us do not know. I was inspired by this talking point, y'all, because when I talk to other men out here that went to HBCUs like me, it's shocking the amount of history we don't know. It's shocking the amount of genealogy that most people have no idea about. They don't know. This big nose, crooked teeth, loudmouth man knows more than half of my peers about that stuff. I do. When I have conversations about my peers from Hampton, y'all, about where we come from, genealogy, Black history, it's crazy how much we don't know. We always put it off as that our educated class should know more. No, we don't. About us, they don't. We're taught how to specialize training. We indoctrinate on how to do a subject. But as far as intellectual curiosity about where we come from as a whole, how to find out where we come from, what to read, what to begin with, we're all the same footing. Many of us have no idea. Many of us don't even have a concept on where we should start from. So I want you to know, man, none of us are different. I am you, you are me, but you got to start with step one. Step one, know your genealogy. Know your genealogy, know your complete historical context. I can go all the way back to 1650 on both sides of my family, fathers, mothers, mother's side, father's side, every side of your family. There are going to be some roadblocks, but you should know where you come from thoroughly. I'm 100% a Black American, 100%. 1,000%, y'all. I know exactly where I come from. So should you. You need to take that time to put in that research and firmly plant yourself. We are not known. Most people have no knowledge of self. Once you find a direction where your roots could be, go to that location next. Go there. Go visit your hometown. Go visit that small town that your grandfather lived in. Go there. I don't understand the mindset, and you see it a lot amongst big city people, y'all, that don't want to go. I don't get if it's a fear thing. Maybe it could be in your bloodstream. Many people fear going back home. I'm telling you, I see it. They fear going back home. I don't know why, but that is actually a real deal I see among city folk. They don't like it. Go back home. And when you find out, talk to the local legends, go to the Black churches, go to the organizations. You will be shocked what you find. Life search is your first step. Step two is going to the community. Step three, we got to start understanding, y'all. If you want something to be successful moving forward, knowing yourself is the first step. Step three, you got to get your personal life straight. Personal life means, as a man, it's cool to have women, bro. I'm not anti-women, but mentally, spiritually, emotionally, you got to be straight. You got to have your mind right. Chasing women is not going to change your life. That's not going to fulfill who you are. You got to find out who you are as a person, what you like to do, get your profession right. As a woman, your life is not going to begin until you have your family, your personal life straight. Having your companion. Women way more care about relationships than men. I can hear a lot of women say that they don't mean as much. That's not true. We need more families. Shahara Ali hit the nail on the head. Familypreneur right here, y'all. That's what I want to focus on the most. We need more Black families, period. Why? Because it matters. It matters. Black families matter so much, y'all. That's how you will get positive anything. We struggle right now with consistent, good, role Black families. As somebody that's been in the school system, my wife works in the school system, my friends is in the school system, who works around this, who works in government, who works for the state, who does multiple jobs. I do. Work with kids all the time. Teenagers especially. A lot of them don't come from good families, man. A lot of them do not come from structured families. A lot of them got a mama at home, a grandma at home, no daddy. A lot of us do not. That is a broken home. We need more structured, more family homes, man. Not for us, for the kids. Until you get there, you won't get generational wealth. You won't get generational happiness. All of that starts with a family, man. Period. My family never had money, y'all. Shocker. My father was a blue-collar man with a lot of kids. But what he had was love. What he had was honor. What he had was respect. And all his kids, he produced that. Judge a man by his character, how he's going to treat you for your family. That's what matters. Does he work hard? Does he try to provide? Does he try to figure out? Never one time did I work my dad with money. My dad still don't have money to this day, y'all. I don't care. He got a phone call. He loved me. My mama, she ain't got money. I don't care. She loved me. I can call. I can talk to her. Those are the things that when you get older, you're going to miss and appreciate the most. Money? You're not going to remember any of that. We got to start thinking from a long-term perspective about that. That is what family is. Family is about the love, the structure, the dynamics. How we going to break it down? That is what matters. You want generational wealth? You need a family. You want generational happiness? You need a family. You want generational support? You need a family. You want generational anything? You need a family. Ladies, nobody you ever meet is going to love you like that man will. Nobody. Men, nobody you ever meet is going to support you like your wife will. It won't. It won't. I'm going to tell you the crash cut right now. No woman I ever met can support me as much as my wife will. It won't. I have fun with you. Have relations, take you out, kiss. But long term, and all of this is a starting point for that. All this is a starting point. I'm not bashing our HBCUs, y'all. Proud of them, love them. But we got a lot of gaps we're missing. Learning back history is a huge gap. Relationship history is a huge gap. We need this stuff. We need it. But right here, man, I want to be able to help anybody that want to learn. I want to be able to show anybody that want to know about themselves. Give it to you for free, man. No charge. I love you. I hope you enjoy your night. I hope you have a phenomenal week. I hope you be safe. I hope you do everything you need to do, man. Only thing I ask y'all to do, man, like, comment, subscribe to the channel, man. I'm trying to grow myself. I'm almost at 500, man. That was my goal for this year, y'all. I am so close to hitting it. I can taste it. But really, man, invest in yourself, believe in yourself, work hard for yourself. Everything will come around to you. I'm a living, breathing witness. Everything that you see right now, me doing social media, man, that is me trying something new for myself. Keeping your truths to yourself means more than anything. I'm telling you. I hope you learned something. If not, if you have any questions, man, follow me on Instagram, Snap, whatever. I don't really do all of them. I'll hit you back when I can, man. I love to talk about this. I love to break it down. Use this information for your betterment. Not for me. Do it for you. All right? It's your boy, King Crowder. Back with some more heat, y'all. I hope this information was as pleasant to you as it was for me. Make sure you subscribe, like to the channel. I'm going to let the vibes take us out. Let me give you a new vibe from my boy Melvin, too, y'all. He turned down star. I didn't shout my boy out earlier. My boy Melvin made this beat for me, y'all. People that believe in you and support you, make sure you show them much love. My boy Melvin made this beat for me, y'all. Shout out to Melvin from LA from the 7-5. Crowder, dang. Crowder, dang. Crowder, gang. Next Sunday, be back again. Gang.